Tonight, on the fifth chapter, the Tigers surprised no one by drafting Spencer Torkelson, but surprised everyone by making him a third baseman. Did Al Avila screw up again, and could we see him in Detroit this summer? NASCAR says goodbye to the Confederate flag. Dennis and Brian react as the fallout from George Floyd's death continues. And one of the UFC's biggest stars wants out, while another announces his retirement. So why is Dana White seeming to shrug it off? Join the conversation by commenting live on YouTube and Facebook Live. This is the fifth chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the fifth chapter. Brian Chapman, Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the fifth chapter.
That's right, and welcome to the fifth chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian. You're down there for your second show this week down in Florida.
Yeah, I'm down here, man. And my Uncle George, who grew up on the Gulf side for most of his life, he was a big Bucks fan, as you can tell. He said I needed to tonight jersey 55. You know who 55 for the Bucks was back in their heyday?
Derek Brooks.
Derek Brooks, 55. That's right. So I'm representing, even though St. Augustine's is south of Jacksonville, and there is some Minshew mania here in the house. He likes the Jags, but with Tom Brady coming in, likes the Bucks, likes the Jags. Kind of works out nice for him. Have two teams, man. I only have one team. It's the Detroit Lions, man.
Now
I should grab.
Has your uncle purchased a Tom Brady jersey yet, or does he plan to?
No, I don't know. He was drawing some things up. He's excited about Tom Brady, man. There's a lot of Brady mania down here. There's no team in the offseason across the country that has more excitement than bringing in a 43-year-old Tom Brady and Gronk too. They're excited about Gronk. I don't think he's gonna make much of an impact. There's no team that's been hyped more than the Bucks, man, in the NFL. There's no doubt about that. So I get that part. Maybe he will get. I bet there's some 12 jerseys that are flying off the shelves. That's for sure.
Well, and I hope there's also some old school 12 jerseys, meaning 12 jerseys from last year. Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I thought you were going like way back in the day.
No.
For some 12 jerseys, but no.
The legendary Penn State receiver. Well, definitely want to thank everybody out there who is watching today's show or listening via the podcast. Of course, we're on YouTube and Facebook Live, for those watching, and for those that want to get the podcast later on, it's on Apple, it's on Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and participate in each show by sending in your comments on Facebook Live on the stream or on YouTube. Let's first, though, take a look at today's book. In the second chapter, NASCAR finally takes down one of its quote-unquote iconic symbols, the Confederate flag. No more Confederate flags at these NASCAR races. In the third chapter, you got a lot of turmoil in the UFC as two of the biggest stars, one out, one of them just flat out retired. In the fourth chapter, Dalvin Cook threatening to hold out. What should the Vikings do? And in the fifth chapter, it's story time. And I've told Dennis this story before, but I'll share with you guys the story during story time. And before I tell you guys the story, which is not going to be until story time, obviously, I want to ask you guys to comment to see if you guys can guess what this is. What is the Murder Mac? What is the Murder Mac? I'm not going to give you any hints, but I just want you guys to guess on your own in the comments on the side. What is the Murder Mac? But Dennis, let's start off though with the first chapter. And in our first chapter, last night, as expected, the Tigers used the number 1 overall pick in the 2020 MLB draft to take Spencer Torkelson, the slugger from Arizona State. That was expected. We both predicted that they would take Torkelson. We both said that they would not take Austin Martin, who actually didn't go until the 5th pick in the draft. What was unexpected was that Rob Manfred announced that he was a third baseman. And when I saw that during the draft, I thought it was strange. I thought maybe because Rob Manfred is a bad commissioner, he just screwed that up like he screws up so many other things. And then I realized that it's the team that gets to select what position the player plays, and it wasn't Rob Manfred's fault. And then you find out via the ESPN interview a little bit later on that Al Avila had spoken to his scouts, and they all agreed that Torkelson should be a third baseman, not a first baseman. One of the ESPN experts last night said that his summer league coach, Torkelson's summer league coach, said that Torkelson had great feet and the ability to turn the double play well from third base. Also, while talking about the draft pick of Torkelson and some other draft picks, they mentioned that Torkelson could be one of the very few players that is put onto the taxi squad, the traveling taxi squad of players, and could end up making his major league debut this summer, a couple of months from now. Dennis, we both agreed with the selection of Torkelson, but what do you think about him starting out as a third baseman, not a first baseman, and also the possibility of him joining the Tigers roster this summer?
Well, if it seems like Al Avila can screw up a sure thing, man. This was like a sure thing. This was supposed to be a party. Yeah, spork, torque, whatever you want to call it. This is going to be great, man. Tigers first overall pick. Let's go. After enduring a 114-loss season, this is the prize. Let's go. Third base. What the hell? That just doesn't seem right. It just my gut feel out of the gate there. You know, we had talked about it last week that possibly the Tigers would put him out in left field, and a lot of it has to do with Nick Castellanos, who I don't say jerked around, but they never really found a spot for him. Put him at third, put him in the outfield, put him back at third, put him at first, put him at DH, put him back in the outfield. And, you know, this has a little bit of Castellanos 2.0 to it.
So you're already concerned that he could be the next Nick Castellanos?
Well, that was my initial. You know what? You just get the excitement about the number 1 pick, and it's like, this is just supposed to be a party, and then it's like, what the hell? You know, he screwed it up. Well, you screw up a sure thing. It seems like it. Look, you know what? He should play. Spencer Torkelson should play his best position in the field. And is he just going to be an okay third baseman? Would he just be an okay outfielder? Could he be a plus first baseman? Find the spot that he's going to be best at in the field and put him there. I mean, we know that he's there for his bat, but here's the one thing. If he's going to be at third, put him at third for a couple of years. This is not like, this was an experiment for 1 month, and, you know, now, hey, we're going to put him out in the outfield, and let's get him over at first. And you better put this kid at the spot where he can thrive, and he's most comfortable, and it's going to be his best position. It seems like all indications are first base, but now that they're going to put him out there at the hot corner, they better stick him there for a couple years.
Well, I would agree they need to stick him there for a while, and I think they will stick him there. I was not thinking Nick Castellanos, because Nick Castellanos is an all-around, all-world, awful defensive player. He was at third base. He couldn't field the ball. He was in right field. He couldn't judge a fly ball. People were talking about him playing first base when he was in Detroit, and I was thinking, wait, so he could just not catch balls thrown to him? I didn't think that he was any good there. But hearing what the experts were saying about him, hearing about what his former summer college coach was saying about him, he's a good defender no matter where he goes. It doesn't seem like he's a Castellanos level defender anywhere he goes. And I also read that if Arizona State had not had their season cut short because of the coronavirus, he was planning to play some third base this year. So I guess that at a pretty high level school at Arizona State, they felt comfortable enough putting him there at least part-time. For me, the biggest issue is not going to be whether or not he can play well defensively, because I think he'll be fine there based on what all the experts are saying. It's all going to be coming down to his bat. And we all know that he can hit. We all know that he can hit for power, but everybody knows that if you can hit, they'll find a way for you to be on that major league club. If you can't hit, then it doesn't matter how good of a defensive player you are, you're not going to make it to the major league club. So for me, look, third base, first base, obviously they're weaker at first base in their farm system than they are at third base, where they at least have a guy like Paredes. So maybe Isaac Paredes is going to have to switch his position, because Torkelson has got to be the front runner for like at least the 2022 or 2023 starting third baseman job as of right now. But I'm more concerned about how he can adjust to pro pitching, how he can adjust to using a wood bat full time, things like that. I'm not as concerned about which position he's going to play. Everybody knew he was drafted as a slugger.
Yeah, I'm worried, and this has a lot to do with Al Avila too. And look, Al Avila not necessarily on the hot seat, but he's not like he's bringing guys in left and right, making all these great moves where you're like, oh man, I trust everything that Al Avila's doing. Man, this guy is just filling out the lineup. Man, he's got it going down to the minor leagues, to the majors. Man, this is somebody we really see building this organization up. It's been the opposite. So you get a sure thing, and you say, okay, first, everybody was talking first or maybe the outfield, and they throw up the third. It's like, wow, what a curveball here by Avila and the Tigers. So, yeah, it's concerning. That part is concerning to me. Good luck. I hope he's great at the hot corner and everything works out there, and he's fabulous and everything, but I just didn't think he could screw up, a sure thing. And, the Tigers didn't by picking him, but then it was like, wait a second. Really? This is going to be the plan?
It was confusing, but given that he is, I guess, supposed to be a natural first baseman, or everyone thought he was a first baseman up until like 25 hours ago, if it doesn't work out at third base, if he's booting balls like Castellanos at third base, then they can move him back to first base, because once again, they don't have any depth. They don't have anybody at first base in their entire farm system who you think could be the starting first baseman in 2021, 2, 3, 4, and beyond. Who knows who's going to start there in 2020? Isn't it supposed to be like Nico Goodrum? I mean, he's just a utility player. I'm not concerned about where Torkelson is going to play defensively. We wouldn't have this discussion if they drafted him as a first baseman and there was that certainty without him switching to a new position. I understand that, and nobody has seen him play at the collegiate level at third base. That's a worry that I think is necessary for a lot of people to have, or it's at least warranted. But if he can hit, then they'll find a place for him, whether it's first base or third. They know he can play at first base, and if that's a last resort, they have to fall back on that in a couple of years, then fine, do it.
It just reminds me, the thing about Castellanos when he was over at third, it was so cringeworthy. So many times, you'd be sitting back watching a Tiger game. It's like, oh, underneath the glove of Castellanos. It's just like, so you put Torkelson over there, and he's got one going through his legs. It's just going to be like, what are they doing? Don't screw up the first overall pick in the draft.
Well,
man.
I'm not going to assume that Torkelson can't play defense, because if he's getting ground balls at first base, he's getting ground balls at third base. And I know that there's a difference because he has to throw the ball across the diamond if he's a third baseman.
That's a very key point.
That is key. But in terms of you saying, oh, look, a ball underneath Castellanos' glove, a ball underneath Torkelson's glove, there's been no evidence that at first base he's a poor defensive player in terms of fielding his position. So I'm not going to assume that he's a poor defensive third baseman. Now, whether he makes the taxi squad and we get to see him in a month or two, or we have to wait until next year when he's in single, double, or triple A to see what his actual defense at third base looks like, we'll hear those scouting reports. We'll hear what the experts are saying about him then. But until he proves that he's a poor defensive player, I'm not going to assume that he's poor defensively. Even though Al Avila doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt, here I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because there are others that are supporting the possibility of Torkelson being a good defensive player. But what do you think about these experts saying that perhaps Torkelson could make the taxi squad this year?
Yeah, that's pretty surprising to think about a guy coming up and, the taxi squad, because if there is a baseball season, we saw that Rob Manfred, your boy, the commissioner, and I say that sarcastically, he's not your boy, he's my boy. I like Rob Manfred. And, guaranteeing that there was going to be a season this year, I like that part.
Told you.
Yeah, I like that guarantee. I like guarantees. I do. I like guarantees, and I like the commissioner coming out guaranteeing it. But because you have your regular 25-man roster, they're going to expand it. and have a taxi squad where you're going to have the availability to play a lot more players. That's going to be really weird because, managers already, they're always sitting around talking about, well, I got to get the 23rd, 24th, 25th man in there. And, now they're going to have a taxi squad. They're going to be like, well, I got to get these guys in here too. And if Torkelson's on the taxi squad, it's got a nice alliteration, man. You got to get him in there and get him some at-bats. I don't know how that plays with, your time, your clock, and all of that, if that starts up. But if it is starting up, you better get him some at-bats. Don't have him on the taxi squad, just to have him look pretty in the dugout or up in the stands with nobody else sitting out there. Torkelson, his best position might just be the only guy sitting up in the stands.
Yeah, look, I think it's nice to talk about the kind of talent that he has and talk about how he's got this rare power and he could be the next Aaron Judge or he could be the next Pete Alonso, whatever you want to say. But I think that the odds of him playing as a Detroit Tiger in 2020 are pretty close to zero. And I would be surprised if he even makes the taxi squad. One thing people have to remember is no matter what kind of prospect Torkelson is, and I was extremely high on him, like I mentioned on Tuesday, I have been eyeing him for the Tigers since 2018. It is extremely rare for a player to play in the majors the same year that they're drafted, and when it does happen, it's almost always a pitcher. I can't ever remember somebody going either straight from college to the majors that same year as a hitter, or even having to go spend a month or two in the minor leagues to get there. So because of that, I don't think that he's going to play this year. And when it comes to the taxi squad, think about this. He hasn't played in a game since March, so he's rusty. If you haven't had a game since March, and then you want to go from facing like a 19-year-old from USC in March to 3 or 4 months off to going and joining the taxi squad, and then in the middle of July or August you're facing Chris Sale, that's not going to happen. I don't think he's even going to make the taxi squad.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. I mean, you look, he's going to be 21 in August. I mean, there are some greats that have been ready to go and good to go at 20, even some younger than that. You go back to Al Kaline, who never spent a minute in the minors. But, you just look at the defending champs right now, the Nationals. Robles, he was up when he was 21. Soto, my boy, he was awesome last year. He was only 20 years old. Bryce Harper was only 20 years old. But mostly, I mean, this is just
But they weren't drafted out of college.
Good point, and that's a great point, and it's reasonable here to really expect when you look. I mean, you mentioned Pete Alonso. He smacked over 50 home runs last year. He's 24 years old. Paul Goldschmidt, another guy that Torque has been compared to because he's a right-handed hitting first baseman. Goldie, 23 years old when he debuted. Even Aaron Judge, he's supposed to have a bat that is like the Judge in New York. Aaron Judge was 24 years old. Castellanos had a cup of coffee when he was 21, and he was up for good when he was 22. But like you indicate, it's not making the jump from college right into the pro. So 2022, to me, that's reasonable. And the one thing, like you look at the guys' trajectories, and I know it's basketball, but we did the same thing with the Pistons and Sekou Doumbouya, who were like, oh, yeah, let's get him up here. But, man, you could tell we were watching a kid that was a complete fish out of water. I mean, he had a couple good games, but you could see, that guy wasn't ready.
Tristan Thompson Kardashian. That was a great move, great play.
Well, that was his highlight. He had a big game against the Celtics too, and those were few and far between. He didn't look like he was ready to play in the NBA.
No, you're right about that.
All right, well, let's get to. You got anything else there for that first chapter in Spork or Torque?
No, let's turn the page. We are on the same page in terms of him not making his debut this year.
Yes.
But you're a little bit more apprehensive about him switching positions.
That just makes me really nervous. I mean, I thought this was like, hey, Tigers, let's I've said it. I've said it 100 times. I'll probably say it 100 more times. All right. NASCARs. We get to Chapter 2. They are banning Confederate flags from all racetracks. And if you've been watching the news or reading the news, you understand that people are talking about where's the line when you have TV shows like Cops and Live PD. Not that I've watched. I've never. People love Live PD. Apparently, it's a very popular show. But
I haven't seen it either.
they banned that show. They're pulling statues down left and right. I'm down here again in Florida. This week we're pulling down an over 100-year-old Confederate statue from downtown Jacksonville. And then today, Fort Bragg. I mean, we got Fort Benning, Fort Bragg, all of these military bases. And come to find out, I didn't know till today that, Fort Bragg was a plantation owner with a history of owning slaves. And it's like, the Congress was like, yep, let's go ahead and let's scrub that name, or, take the name down and rename it, even though the president's saying, not so fast. But you start saying, where's the line for all of these things, including, banning the Confederate flag at NASCAR races.
Yeah, and actually the guy that kind of started the whole push to ban the Confederate flags in NASCAR, at least since the death of George Floyd, was the one and only black NASCAR racer, Bubba Wallace. And he actually went on CNN earlier this week, and here is what he said to Don Lemon.
We are trying to figure out next steps, and my next step would be to get rid of all Confederate flags. There should be no individual that is uncomfortable showing up to our events to have a good time with their family, that feels some type of way about something they have seen, an object they have seen flying. No one should feel uncomfortable when they come to a NASCAR race. So it starts with Confederate flags. Get them out of here. They have no place for them.
So when you have somebody who's a rarity in that sport, and by rarity I mean he's the only black car racer, and you're going through this situation in our country, it makes sense for NASCAR to listen to him. And this was, I'm not going to sit here and call it a brilliant move, because it's a move that should have happened decades ago. And honestly, it never should have happened, because as a lot of people from the South forget, the Confederates lost the war. The Confederates lost the war, and they were enemies of the United States of America. It's a flag that stands for racism, slavery, white power, and it's a flag that white nationalists and white supremacists and the KKK love. They get that sucker tattooed on their chests, on their arms, on their backs, and all that stuff. And they don't do that because, they're married to a black person, or they're married to a Jew, or they donate lots of money to the NAACP. This was a no-brainer. It's sad that it took this long, but it's great that it's finally gone. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that it lasted this long. Because, I mean, think about going to a Detroit Lions game downtown. All right? What if it was the same atmosphere as you had at a NASCAR race, where you got people tailgating around, but there's also 300 or so Confederate flags flying? You go into the stadium and you got people wearing Honolulu blue and silver jerseys, but you have folks wearing also Confederate flag shirts and Confederate flag hats. That would never happen in Detroit. It doesn't happen at any other pro sports arena or field or stadium around the country, but it does happen at NASCAR events. They feel like it's okay to wear those Confederate flags and fly those Confederate flags there. It's about bleeping time. Yeah,
one thing, if you know anything about the Civil War, if you don't know anything about the Civil War and you look it up, the Confederates were fighting to keep slaves, and the North wasn't. So to your point, I mean, that's pretty black and white, when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
And yet, over the years, like the Confederate flag for people in the South, I don't know if each person was looking at it and clinging to it like, yeah, white power and everything else. To me, growing up, the Confederate flag, the first time I remember seeing it was I was watching the Dukes of Hazzard. They had a car that they slid over the roof, and it was like, hey, they were playing the music, and it was like, hey, it's a cool car. Hey, the Confederate flag. And it's like, hey, that just means you love the South. And whether it was football teams or you see the flag over and over again, if you would have asked me at any point when I was younger, I would have said, yeah, that just kind of means, that you love the South, and that, and that's what it represents. And that's what it represented to me. And I didn't know we actually had, my dad had one of those flags, and it was down. I found it when I was a kid, and I took it up to Eastern. And we actually had that flag, the Confederate flag, in a window at one of the apartments that I had. And I had a friend that was come over. He's like, hey, man, which one of your friends is the racist? I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, man, that's a racist flag. I was like, no, it's like a General Lee flag, man. He's like, man, that's a racist flag.
Yeah.
I was like, and I didn't know that. And he's like, ask some other people. We were going. I'm like, what do you think? And well, my friend was black, and then we were talking. He's like, oh yeah, man, that's totally racist. I don't know what happened to that flag. I took that flag down. Like I was like, I don't know. I didn't know that. And he's like, yeah, that's racist flag. So I don't know. Some people they say I'm ignorant. I just didn't know it. But for a lot of people, it just meant like, Kid Rock's another one. Like people have been saying for years. Like, go ahead, kid, take it down. He's like, I'm not taking it down. He's like, throwing up his middle finger. He's like, it doesn't mean anything. He's like, I'm not a racist. That's not what it means to me. It means that I love the South.
Okay. And he's not from the South, but he loves the South. I mean, look, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that perhaps Kid Rock is not a racist, but then he throws that stupid racist X up. And I think a few years ago he stopped putting that stupid racist X up. But I mean, you look at a sport like NASCAR, which I don't really consider it a sport because the athletes are the cars, but just for the sake of this conversation, you look at NASCAR, and it is a predominantly Southern and a predominantly white sport. And outside of the stupid racist Confederate X, there really isn't much of a reason for it to be an only Southern and an only white sport. But you look at all the drivers except for Bubba Wallace, they're white. The vast majority of them have Southern accents, and the fans feel comfortable waving that Confederate flag around where they wouldn't wave it around at other sporting events. I wonder if now that the Confederate flag is gone, more races will feel comfortable going to events, and if more races will feel comfortable trying to become NASCAR drivers, because I don't know of anybody of any race really, but I certainly don't know of any minorities who grew up wanting to be race car drivers. And certainly if you're a 10-year-old kid and you don't know anything about the Confederate flag and you're a minority and you say, hey Dad, I like NASCAR racing, can you take me to a race? Your dad might say, no, there are a bunch of races there, look at that X. But now that that X is gone, could there be some minorities that go? Like, I wouldn't watch because for me it's boring. A lot of people around here just say that it's boring. A lot of people outside of the South say that it's boring. But everybody of all races loves fast cars. And so from that standpoint, I wonder if taking down the racist X will allow people that were pushed away just because it was predominantly white and Southern will give it a look.
Yeah, I don't know. I would guess no, but this particular story here, this is crossing everything. It's sports, but it's completely mixed in with everything that's going on right now. I mean, George Floyd was laid to rest this week, and the conversation is about, okay, how can we be better? And these are the kind of conversations that we're going to have. And it comes down to, hey, what TV shows? What about Fort Bragg? I was just looking today, a quick Google search, because they're taking a couple different statues down. Robert E. Lee in Virginia. I don't know if they've taken it down today, but that was part of the conversation. He was part of a Confederate leader. He had slaves, everything else you can go through. But I did a quick search in counties in Florida, and I put Lee in there. And yeah, sure enough, there's a Lee County here in Florida. And you look on Wikipedia, and it's like, named after Robert E. Lee. So are they going to rename the county down here? You look at Fort Bragg, again, another quick search here. They've got high schools, they've got middle schools, they've got all kinds of schools that are named after Bragg. This particular conversation, like, all right, and this is, and the point here, and it's the conversation and what you say debate, is like, where do you draw the line? Do you feel like all of these things should be scrubbed? Do you feel like they keep, what is it, the popular word now, cancel? The cancel culture, everything. Let's, just if it has anything to do with it, people are like, some going too far saying, yeah, it's everything. We're going to end up canceling everything, or we're going to have conversations, with each one of these things and try to figure out what to do.
I don't think we need conversations about the Confederacy because they, number one, lost the war, and number two, were an enemy of the United States of America. Like that right there should be enough. I know people like to say, well, they were American citizens. They weren't trying to be. They were trying to be Confederate citizens. When you think about enemies of the United States, Where do we find statues of enemies of the United States of America in the United States of America outside of Confederate flags? Like, where is the Osama bin Laden statue? We don't see one of those. Where are some of the, where like whoever was the top general in Japan when they started sending those kamikaze planes to Hawaii? Like, where is the statue of that general in Hawaii or anywhere else? That there aren't any of those. They were enemies and they lost the war. Where is the statue of Hitler? Are we have schools named after Hitler? No. So let's get rid of that stuff. If this is what it takes to get rid of all of them, or at least another big swath of them, then great. As far as the conversation about which enemies of the United States we should continue to honor, zero.
Yeah, well, I mean, the difference between the Confederacy and all of those names and the guys that you named is like, they were outside of the United States. I mean, the South, I mean, that was the whole point about that. But your point about them,
they were killing U.S. soldiers.
I mean, they were cousins fighting each other. I mean, a lot of that's the thing. We know what the principle was about what the war was, but for a lot of the soldiers in the South, man, they were just they were, in a lot of cases, born here in the U.S. and they were just sent there to fight. So, I mean, there's that part about it.
But that doesn't mean that we have to celebrate them with a statue.
Well, you know what? I tend to agree with you on that. I wonder, though, like when it comes down to the statues or it comes down to scrubbing the names, like do we just want where are we going? Are we going to schools? Are we going to counties? Are we going to street names? Are we doing all that? Like, I don't know the answer to that. But, there's a lot of cost to that. Can we take that cost and should we put that money that it would take to, scrub all of these different names or pull down statues, and can we put that towards the inner city? Is that money? Is that the way that it's best spent?
Well, look, when it comes to the money taking down a statue, look, you got protesters that'll gladly use their own money to get a rope and a pickup truck, and they'll do it for free.
Well, that's true, but what about the Fort Bragg and everything else, and every sign
Spend
and everything you want to do,
and rename it. Put some new signs.
Yeah,
up.
I don't know how much it costs. Renaming the counties, all of those things. I do know we have one more video from. It's part of NASCAR, but it's the truck series, and a guy named Ray Ciccarelli and what he had to say about the Confederate flag. Do we have that quote?
Yeah, we do. Before I show it, it's funny because you called him Ray Ciccarelli, and the first two syllables of his name sound like racist.
Oh, let's go to that racist. I mean, Ray Ciccarelli.
Racist Ray Ciccarelli. But yeah, so what he did.
I wonder what you're laughing about.
After the NASCAR announced that they were getting rid of the Confederate flag, Ray Ciccarelli, who is a NASCAR Truck Series driver, shared a message on Facebook indicating he will quit racing after the 2020 season. You can see what he wrote down here, a lot of caps, capitalizing the first letter of a sentence issues and things like that. But he says, if this is the direction NASCAR is headed, we will not participate after the 2020 season is over. I don't believe in kneeling during the anthem, nor taking people's rights to fly whatever flag they love. What if that includes the swastika? I could care less about the Confederate flag, but there are people that do, and it doesn't make them racist if all you are doing is effing one group to cater to another. I mean...
Well, there's a hell of a lot of people. There's a hell of a lot of people that last line, the effing one group to cater to another. There's a hell of a lot of people that agree with Ray Ciccarelli.
Racist Ray Ciccarelli. Well, here's one other thing that I think is important to mention from that same article, and I'll highlight it for you. It says, out of 18 career races on the NASCAR Gander RV Truck or Outdoors Truck Series, Ciccarelli has placed in the top 10 once. So it's not like by losing this racist Ray Ciccarelli, NASCAR's losing some big legend. But it's one thing for you and I to talk about losing the Confederate flag, but he might have a point there when he talks about the NASCAR fans and the NASCAR fans that have the Confederate flags at all these events and have the NASCAR and have the that racist X tattooed on their bodies. It's not like they don't love other sports, but they're okay showing it at these events. And I wonder what NASCAR is going to do to try to enforce this policy of no flags. Like, it's easy if somebody has a flag, tell them to take it down when they're inside, but are they going to be allowed at tailgates? What if somebody's wearing a Confederate flag hat? Are you going to confiscate it? And certainly there's nothing you could do if somebody's walking around bare-chested with a big racist X on their back in the tailgating parking lot. How are they going to enforce all this?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, go through Ford Field when there came down to any signs about fire Patricia or fire Milla, and you saw like the security running after people with signs, and then But to your point, man, if you look at some of the videos about at races and everything else, it's not just racing. If you just you look into the stands, it's pretty easy, if somebody's flying a flag. But man, there's shirts, there's hats, there's coats, there's all that. They're gonna have people going through the stands, pulling people's coats and and all that. And can't imagine that you'd be able to do it at a tailgate.
Yeah, and I just put up a picture from that same article of a tailgate, and you can see right there 4 Confederate flags. And think about this once again. If you were to go to a Tigers game or a Lions, Pistons, Red Wings, Michigan State game, you park your car, you're heading up to the stadium, when would you ever see 4 racist X flags flying? The answer is never. You would never see that. But one other thing that you mentioned was talking about getting rid of some of these TV shows. Live PD, I never watched it, but Cops is going away. And I was thinking, like, wow, that seems like it's a step too far. I get that they focus a lot on neighborhoods that have lots of minorities and things like that, and a lot of they focus on a lot of areas that are low socioeconomically because that's where there tends to be more crime. And you never see Cops in Birmingham or Grosse Pointe or something like that. But I, like a lot of people, I enjoyed watching Cops growing up. I'm disappointed that they're getting rid of the show Cops. I don't think it was necessary to get rid of it.
Me neither. People love the live PD. I've seen Cops, like who hasn't, back in the day. But man, you're for the people out there that are watching, they're going to say, either of you guys have ever watched live PD? You guys, it's crazy, man, because it's a very popular show. Like it gets talked about a lot. I've just never watched it.
Well, and the reason they're deciding to get rid of it is because apparently in one episode of live PD, an African American was apprehended, and then he later died while in police custody. So they're protesting that. But let's turn the page now to the 3rd chapter, and that takes us to the UFC. And they just finished UFC 250 over the weekend. Amanda Nunes, the greatest female fighter of all time, won. Perhaps the bigger story was about the 2 fighters, about 2 of the biggest fighters in the UFC who weren't even on the fight card and might not ever fight in the UFC ever again. Jon Jones, a criminal who loves to drink and drive. He's one of the greatest UFC fighters of all time. He's a light heavyweight. Apparently, UFC President Dana White wanted him to move up a weight class to heavyweight to fight Francis Ngannou, but Jon Jones asked for more money to do so. Dana White claimed that Jones was asking for Deontay Wilder money. Deontay Wilder, of course, a boxer. And here is how Jon Jones responded on Twitter. He said, "I don't even make half of what Deontay Wilder makes. If my reputation causes you to undervalue me this much, just go ahead and release me from my UFC contract altogether. I'm sure some promoter somewhere will be more than happy to pick me up." Then there's also the story of Conor McGregor. Actually, no, before I get to that, Jorge Masvidal, another UFC fighter, also asked to be released from his contract because he wasn't being paid enough. But then there's Conor McGregor. He went off to do a boxing fight, and then he came back and he lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov, and then he fought a washed-up Donald Cerrone a couple of months ago, and he's been waiting for another fight and hasn't been able to get the fight that he wanted. And then on Saturday, hours before UFC 250 started, he put out this statement on Twitter: "Hey guys, I've decided to retire from fighting." And he's got a picture of himself with his mom at the bottom. So that was all surprising. And after hearing all that, in the post-fight press conference for UFC 250 on Saturday, Dana White was asked about those 3 fighters, and here is what he said in response.
And one of the beautiful things about this sport is you don't have to fight. This isn't the NBA or the NFL where you better be at practice, you better show up and do this, you better do that. You don't have to do anything here. And if these guys want to sit out and retire right now, or anybody feels uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form with what's going on, you don't have to fight. It is all good. So if that's what Conor's feeling right now, Jon Jones, Jorge Masvidal, I feel you. It's not like I'm going, holy shit, this is crazy. This is nuts. Nothing is crazy and nuts right now because everything is crazy and nuts right now. So on a certain level, I totally understand it and get it.
Masvidal, he spoke to ESPN earlier tonight, and he said he laid out a statistic that fighters get paid 18% of the revenue generated by the UFC. Are you able to address that, whether that's accurate and whether that's a number that could change, that he's saying fighters should get more of the revenue that's generated?
Being the financial wizard that he is, I'm assuming his numbers are correct. Here's the thing about Masvidal. We just signed a new deal with Masvidal. Masvidal just signed a new 8-fight deal. He's got 7 fights left on his deal, And my people were working with him and trying to get a deal done with him when he already has a deal. Jon Jones has like 7 fights left on his deal. He just signed a new deal less than a year ago. So guys, you can say whatever you want about it. I have a deal. We just did a deal with both guys. This isn't one of those scenarios where like they've got some 3-year-old deal and it's like, oh man, that was 3 years ago. I'm in a much different place than this was months ago.
So there you go. A lot of blunt and direct to the point responses from Dana White. Dennis, what do you think about him saying if you don't want to fight, you don't have to, in regards to Jones, Masvidal, and McGregor, and McGregor saying, you know what, I'm just going to retire?
Yeah, I don't know much about Jorge, but I certainly know the name Colin McGregor and Bones Jones. I mean, these guys, if you ask me who are the greatest or most well-known names in UFC history, I would say, Anderson Silva, Chuck Liddell, Cormier maybe, but I would say pretty quickly, Colin McGregor, and I would say Jon Jones. And, to just kind of brush these guys off, Dana White, man, Dana White is amazing in that he doesn't bend over backwards to mainstream media. He has done pretty much everything. It's like, I don't know, I'll give this a bonus. It's like a YouTube sport that it started out like, groundswell. But, man, it's just the fans – it's like he can do no wrong, man. The fans just he's bulletproof, and seemingly so is UFC. It's like they don't need the big names, they don't need old people. They don't need anybody, and it just keeps. They just have such a huge following. So, everything that Dana White has done is turned to gold here. And you know what? I think he knows these guys will be back. I mean, what else? They can go do gimmicky things, to make millions. And, the point that when it comes down to boxing, the boxers are still making more money there. But when it comes down to it, man, he knows these guys will be back.
Yeah, I think he does too. And, I mean, you just look at Conor McGregor's retirement. He's talked about retiring before. He was frustrated that he couldn't fight Khabib or he couldn't fight Tony Ferguson and all this other stuff. And, Dana White mentioned that we're in a pandemic, so everything is crazy right now. I think that he looks at this the way that a lot of folks are looking at this. It's not really a retirement. It's just a timeout. I think that if you're McGregor, what's the point of coming back and not fighting in front of a whole bunch of fans? A lot of people love him. A lot of people hate him. A lot of people want to cheer for him. A lot of people want to boo him. So what's the point of doing something like that right now? And then you look at the actual tweet. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with tweeting out a picture of you and your mom, particularly if it's on Mother's Day, but you're tweeting out a picture with you and your mom as you retire. that's typically a time where you might show yourself with your teammates. You might show yourself standing over somebody that you beat to win one of your championships, but just like, hey, here's a picture of me and my mom. It's a weird way to retire. Nobody's buying it. He's going to sit out in Ireland on a boat, drinking his proper number 12 for a little bit, and then once there's some fans, he's going to come back. And then when it comes to Jon Jones, there could be some more validity to this, to him wanting to leave just because, he is comparing himself to these boxers who, it still boggles my mind that boxing isn't as popular, but they make a whole lot more money. You wonder where he would go. Would he go to Bellator to fight? And if he does go there, who's going to watch Jon Jones fight a bunch of ex-UFC washed-up fighters and beat them in the first round of every single match? I don't know if he's gonna do that, but you're one fight into an 8-fight contract and you want out. It's tough to buy into that.
Yeah, I was just looking through Facebook Live. Shout out, man! It's the first time that we've gone on to a Facebook Live, and I just looked down at Anthony Cruz saying, "Man, UFC, the sport's just going to keep rolling." That's my point, man. These guys, they're bulletproof. They can do whatever they want, man. And the people just keep lapping it up, man. And they've got a huge following, and it just keeps going. By the way, all the way through with all of the feedback that we're getting through, whether it's Facebook Live or whether it's through YouTube, when it comes down to the fifth chapter, we'll go through all of those questions and we'll answer all of them. We'll read your points, and if there are questions, we will read those. That's coming up in the fifth chapter, but we're just through chapter 3 now.
Yeah, one other thing that I wanted to bring up in this third chapter is I saw Dana White, it was either on Monday or Tuesday on ESPN, I believe it was on First Take, and when it came to the fighters and their compensation, something that Masvidal and Jones were concerned about, that's why they want to be released, Dana White said, look, you got these other businesses that are laying off employees during the pandemic. You got other sports that are laying off employees. In baseball, you got teams that are deciding not to play their minor leaguers during the pandemic. But despite all that, despite the fact that he's not getting any revenue from tickets, he hasn't laid off a single employee. He hasn't laid off a single fighter. And I think that was an interesting point that he was able to make. But then one of the ESPN hosts, it was a replacement for Stephen A. Smith, checked him on that and said, well, if you haven't laid anybody off yet, maybe that suggests that the fighters are right, that they're not being paid enough. So, I mean, when it comes to the compensation, we're probably never going to know because he's not going to open up his books, just like the MLB owners are never going to open up their books.
Best point you made during the entire show, Chet, right there. You're right, man. That is not going to happen. No. All right, so that gets us to chapter 4. And it has to do with a running back in the NFC North. The Lions are looking pretty good with what they have going with their running back situation right now. Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift, the 1-2 punch. But in Minnesota, Dalvin Cook out of Florida State. And you look at the outstanding running back for Minnesota. He's in the last year of his deal, and he wants a new deal, or he's threatening to hold out. What should happen with this situation with Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah, well, this is going to be the second segment in a row where I side with big business and I don't side with the player. I get where Dalvin Cook is coming from because he was a Pro Bowler last year. He's projected to make $1.3 million in the 2020 season, and he is playing a position where there's a short shelf life. So I get him wanting to get a new deal and him wanting to get a lot of money. In an ESPN article that I was reading, it said that David Johnson is getting $13 million a season and that Dalvin Cook wants to get that much or more. Based on his production last year, he might be worth that. The problem is that he is injury prone. In his rookie year, 2017, he tore his ACL. I believe he only played 5 games.
Against the Lions when he tore his ACL.
That's correct. The very next year, 2018, he had injury issues and only played in 11 games. Now, this past year, he played in 14 games plus the playoffs. He played in the first 14 games, and his value is certainly there because in the final 2 games where he didn't play, the Vikings lost, and they scored a total of 29 points, under 20 points in both games. And in the first 14 games, they scored at least 20 points in 11 of their games. They also lost a key weapon in Stephon Diggs, so he is valuable, but in terms of giving him $13 million a year and a big extension of 4 or 5 years, you can't do that at that position where healthy running backs don't last long, and he has proven to be an unhealthy running back.
Well, he has. I mean, if you look, he's definitely injury prone. He's missed almost 40% of his regular season games in 3 years. So, man, it'd be really tough to get him the money, except when you start looking, if he gets over 100 scrimmage yards, the Vikings in that time when he plays, 9 games over 500. If he doesn't, 3 games under 500. All the numbers, man. And, he's got 2 guys behind him, Alexander Madison, who they say they love. But as soon as Cook got hurt late last year, then Madison wasn't ready to go. And then they had Mike Boone in there. Not an incredible amount of depth after him. And I know that they got rid of a ton of guys because of cap issues. They had 15 draft picks this year, talking about the Vikings. Then they traded Crybaby Diggs to the Bills and got a boatload for him. But I think that not that this is a lot to do about nothing, but I think they're going to end up, coming to an agreement, and he's going to get his money. And I don't think he's going to have to. I don't think he's going to have to hold out, man. Kirk Cousins has to have this Vikings team has to have Dalvin Cook. Who's the most important person for the Vikings offense? It's Dalvin Cook. It's not Captain Kirk.
He is important, but I mean, if you're going to give him an extension that's going to be more than 2 years, if you're going to give him a 4 or 5 year extension. Through year 2023, 2024, and let's say they want to give him a big chunk of guaranteed money, and all of a sudden he's lost all of his speed, because even if he stays healthy, he's lost all of his speed, or he has another knee injury, then you're absolutely shooting yourself in the foot. If I was the Minnesota Vikings and I'm looking for a way to solve this issue, I'd say, look, you're worth more than $1.3 million. We get this. Would you be interested in a 2-year extension? We can give you a little bit more money this year. We can give you a 2-year extension. I don't know any players or agents that would take that because they want to have the long-term security. But
he wants Zeke Elliott money. He wants Christian McCaffrey money. He wants Todd Gurley money.
He wants healthy running back money.
Yeah, he does. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's a huge gamble. You're right. Of all the things, he's injury prone. The position isn't worth that much. All of these things, and the Vikings do hold all the cards here. But I think that they'll find a way to get him in here. I don't think he's a top 5 back in the NFL right now, but I definitely think he's top 10. And I'll make a case for him being at number 6. I just was going through him today. I would say that the best back in the league right now, I don't know, Derrick Henry, Zeke Elliott, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. There's 4 there. You might rank them a little bit differently, but I think everybody would agree that those are the top 4. I throw Alvin Kamara. Those are the top 5. You, again, order them up any way you want. But when you start getting to after 5, I'll put Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, what's the kid from the Raiders' names? Josh Jacobs, the first-round pick last year out of Alabama. Joe Mixon would be in there. So, Dalvin Cook on the outside, just sitting there knocking on the door of being a top 5 back in the NFL.
Yeah, he could be there. He just has to play enough, and he's got to probably take it to another level in order to be one of those top 5 running backs in the NFL. But if you're, in that 6 to 10 range, when you're healthy and you're not all that healthy, and you're gonna talk about you want a monster deal, I get him saying that he wants more money. But it matters how much money he wants, and it matters how long he's going to go. This is the perfect time for him to do so because he's coming off of his healthiest and best year. But the Vikings aren't stupid. They know that he's had 1 healthy year and 1 Pro Bowl year. It's not 3 years in a row like that.
They're not stupid, but I bet they pay him.
I don't know, because the Steelers didn't pay Le'Veon Bell. I mean, there's a history of teams deciding not to do that, so I don't know what's going to happen. I think that would certainly benefit I'm not going to say the Lions, but it would certainly benefit the Packers if Dalvin Cook didn't play.
There you go. Anything else on this? We got a lot of feedback here we got to get to, and story time.
Yeah, let's get to some of that feedback.
All right, well, first out on Facebook Live, and this was a good job by you, Chet, putting this involved in here, because I'm looking through. Brian Jacob, Jim's Lions, says it's good to watch and hear both of you guys. Jesse Woods watching. Here's my cousin in Florida, Michelle, who says, I love the Bucks jersey. Well, she's a big Bucks fan. not a surprise. Angelo saying good job. Katie, Corey, Anthony, the UFC is going to keep rolling. There's Chuck Mifsud on here. Say something so the Fith chapter knows you're here. That's right. Well, that's Facebook throwing that out there. Nice job. I looked up Murder Mac, and what I seen, I kind of wish I wouldn't have Googled it. LOL. That's from Dave Hightower.
Okay.
I don't know. You have to tell me what that is. Shout out to Christopher and Anthony. Kerry Larrabee, who is also down here in Florida. Big Bucks fan. Guess what he's saying?
I'm assuming he's going to say Tampa Bay is going to win the Super Bowl.
He said, nice Derek Brooks jersey. Yeah, and I do think he thinks that. Matt Derry on Facebook says,
Hey, Matt.
Announcing Torkelson as a third baseman was stupid. The kid is a stud, a no-brainer pick, and it's awesome. But once again, they find a way to put a minor dent on the car.
I don't think it's a dent on the car. I think it might be, let's say you're from a very wealthy family and it's your Sweet 16 and you're hoping for a brand new black Escalade, and then it shows up and it's blue or it's red or it's white. It's still an Escalade. It can still do what it's supposed to do best, which is, be a nice luxurious vehicle with lots of power and storage and all that stuff. It just might look a little bit different. It's on the opposite side of the field. And if it doesn't work out, especially being in a very rich family, you can flip it back and make it a black Escalade. If it doesn't work out at third base, all of a sudden Spencer Torkelson is not an atrocious first baseman. You can flip him back there. The most important thing is that the bat is in the Tigers organization.
Yeah, I get the skepticism. That's where I was at. Of course, you can always go back. If you're just watching this live, we'll have it posted up. You can go on YouTube. You should subscribe there. You probably are already, but, these are all booked and accounted for, and you can go back and watch them, and you can go back and listen to them. All right, we've got more here. DJ says, you finally got rid of that terrible Griffey jersey. Good.
I didn't get rid of it, but okay.
Michael Hightower saying, what's up, boys? Same thing with Michael Simon here. Now we switch it over to YouTube, looking for some of the feedback here. That theme song was a banger. That's the intro, all the way back to the beginning. Is that good?
Yes, that's good.
Any update on how college hockey is addressing COVID status? Big fan of the NCAA and WCHA leagues. ? That is from Paul. Well, they are under the guidelines of just like all other NCAA athletics. I mean, the day, what was it, 3/11? That was a Wednesday, 3/12, when the Big Ten basketball tournament was going on around noon. They pulled them off the floor. The hockey was getting ready. I know the Big Ten hockey was getting ready for the semifinals in Ohio State that weekend, and they shut it down. So it's the same thing. No news on that, although they're letting basketball and football players work out.
Yeah, the revenue sports. So that's not a good look if you're a Big Ten hockey fan, because if they're losing money and you're not going to have all these fans coming into basketball and football games, if they happen, then they're probably not going to want to bring back the non-revenue sports to take up the money that the football and basketball teams are bringing in. They need fans in order to bring these non-revenue sports back, like hockey.
All right, and one more here is from Keith, who's got a few, man. Liked the discussion of the Tigers draft picks. He says he liked the first 3 picks, but he'd have taken Casey Martin over Cruz, although I love his dad and granddad when they played, and he mentions that he's old. He's asking about my weight loss update. He says, I will join you. I gained weight with the gym closing, eating up all the food, all the chicken, and everything else. Well, you know what? I'll be giving the updates since I've gone down here to Florida. I can tell you during the pandemic, man, my weight shot way up here. So I have not. When I'll get back to Michigan, which will be on Monday, I'll be hitting the scale there and getting back to my routine of low flour, low sugar, low alcohol. But I have to admit, down here in Florida, I've had all 3, so I gotta work on that.
The 50 and 50. You know what you could do before you leave is you could
50 and 55 right now, man.
Well, it's ballooned up. What you could do is you could run away from the alligators. That'll teach you to get in shape. You got some alligators chasing you?
Well, my uncle does have a lot of Gator stuff. He was ready to pull it out. He said the old ball coach Spurrier lives in the county here of St. Augustine County, whatever that is. So he was like, let's put some Gator stuff up there. I was like, let's go with the Bucks, man. You know what? I'm rooting for the Lions this year, Chapman. But I also think the Bucks. They're going to be my B. They're my B team now. Go Bucks.
All right.
Go Buccaneers. I don't want to say Bucks, man. It sounds
you sound like a big Ohio State fan when you keep on saying Bucks, 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 go Bucks.
Well, just think, as a Detroit sports fan right now, we got we just drafted a catcher in the second round.
Gosh.
He's a Buck. We know our corner. He was a Buckeye. We also drafted an offensive lineman, man. Michigan's turned it into Columbus North.
In the 7th round, Bob Quinn drafted another Deep South Buckeye because there were 3 Deep South Buckeyes drafted by Quinn in April.
Yeah, I've always said this, man. You can have your college loyalties and everything else, but man, when they go once they go pro, bring them on, man. In fact, I love Chris Spielman. I love Chris Spielman.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's just 4 drafted Buckeyes in a span of 2 months coming to Detroit. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, and I won't say go Bucks anywhere. Go Buccaneers.
There you
Buccaneers.
Go. All right. Now let's transition to the 5th chapter, story time. And live from Florida, we'll start off with the man, the 5th, the legend, Dennis Fithian.
Well, coming up on Sunday, I'll be driving back home to Michigan, driving up 75, and on the way down, was thinking sports, looking at all the different, whether it was, Cincinnati's football stadium or, Man of War Street going through Kentucky or right through downtown Atlanta. So I saw the Braves Stadium. But I've mapped it out. I am staying overnight. As I'm taking my mom back here. We're not going straight through. Chattanooga going to be the destination. I'm thinking about taking a look at. I was looking at what are the sites, the historical landmark. There was a huge Civil War battle there in Chattanooga, so I'll be stopping there. And the plan is to check that out. Whether it's a lookout site or where the actual battlefield was, I'm not sure there, but I'll be reporting back on Tuesday about that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how people feel about that now that the Confederate flag has been taken down at NASCAR. And honestly, is it even going to be open? I know that in Tennessee they've been open in terms of most of their businesses for longer than we have in Michigan. But A, is it going to be open? And B, are there going to be more people shedding tears over the losing Army now that they can't wave their precious Confederate flags and show how much they hate black people at NASCAR races?
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's the battlefield. I'm not going to any inside, museum or anything like that. But it was like if there's some kind of lookout, like, hey, here's a marker. Check it out. Here's the battlefield. Might take a look at it. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I told this story to Dennis a few weeks ago, and there's actually an update to it. But before the show, or as the show started, I asked you guys if you had ever heard of the Murder Mac, and if so, or if not, would you like to guess what the Murder Mac was? And we had one person who sent in a message via Facebook Live, said that he wished he hadn't Googled it. I didn't even know that you could find it in Google. But here's the Murder Mac, because a lot of you guys know I also drive for Uber. And I had never heard of the Murder Mac until I started driving for Uber, but I know that a lot of you guys actually know what it is. And it's not a serial killer whose last name is McAdams or his first name is Mackenzie. It's not a macaroni and cheese dish to die for. The Murder Mac is the nickname of a McDonald's on the corner of Southfield Road and Joy Road on the west side of Detroit, and is connected to a BP station. Perhaps you have been there before. But a couple of nights ago, about 2 a.m. I'm driving, I pick up a woman in northwest Detroit, and I was taking her home. And while we were going south on the Southfield Freeway, she asked if I could stop somewhere for her to get some food. I said, "Where do you want to go?" She said,
Murder Mac.
She didn't say,
ahead,
no.
Sorry.
She didn't say Murder Mac. She said, "There's a McDonald's on the way on Joy Road." I was like, all right. And I was like, "Oh, you mean the Murder Mac?" And she said, why does everyone call it that? And so I told her that I had never been there before, but I proceeded to tell her what other Uber riders of mine have told me about the Murder Mac. And I first heard about it from a rider about 2 or 3 years ago. The rider wanted to get some food, and we were driving by the McDonald's. I said, hey, you want to go there? He said, no, I'm not going over there. They call that the Murder Mac. I was like, really? Why? He said, there's always murders taking place at the Murder Mac. And I was like, well, why do people kill each other at the Murder Mac? And he said he wasn't sure, but it was probably because of the drive-thru. And at this drive-thru, which once again, it's a McDonald's and a BP station connected in one. And behind the McDonald's is the drive-thru lane, and right next to that is a wall. And he said because there's the wall so close to the McDonald's, if something happens, there's just nowhere to go. If there's a shooting, there's just nowhere to go, and you get stuck. I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Then a few months later, someone asked if I could stop at a gas station on their way home. I said, okay, and we got off the freeway. I asked if she wanted to go there to the BP station at the Murder Mac, and she said no. I mean, she shot that down quickly and said there's too many crazy people over there. Then about 6 or 8 months ago, I was taking a rider home, and we were talking about the Murder Mac because we were driving by there, and she was like, yeah, they always be shooting up that McDonald's. It's like, man. And then about a month or two ago, I was talking to somebody else about the Murder Mac, and she said that she never went over there. And when I was talking about how dangerous the drive-thru apparently was, she said that, yeah, people always get robbed at the drive-thru, possibly because of the wall being so close. And she said that her cousin got robbed at the Murder Mac's drive-thru at gunpoint. So I told my rider that a couple of days ago and made it pretty clear.
I really hope this story ends where you go in. I really hope that you go through it. Let's hear it.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. But I told her we're not stopping at the Murder Mac. And after she heard that, she was okay. And she told me that she used to live on the west side of Detroit, and she recently moved to the east side of Detroit. And that's why she wasn't familiar with the Murder Mac, and she didn't know why everyone was calling it that. So she just went home without any food. But I can tell you this. I've driven to every neighborhood that you can think of in Metro Detroit, even the quote-unquote dangerous neighborhoods. I've filled up my gas tank in all sorts of different neighborhoods, but I have never gotten any food at the Murder Mac. I've never gotten gas at the Murder Mac gas station, and I don't plan to ever do so. That's the one place I won't go.
I'll pay for your food. You go. It'll be good for story time coming up next week.
You gonna pay for my ER visit too?
Well,
you gonna pay for a bulletproof vest so I can withstand the gunshots?
Hey, you know what? Sometimes you're, dying for a Big Mac, right? That's what they say.
Literally dying for a Big Mac.
Hey, how about this funny tease? Coming up on Tuesday, Bob Quinn says Jeff Okudah is going to move to linebacker for the start of the season. And Al Avila says Tork, he's putting him over at shortstop now. We'll get to that coming up on Tuesday on the Fifth Chapter.
He represents the myth by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the myth. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fith the end. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it